In this session, we're moving into Chapter 8 of Superbloom, How Technologies of Connection Tear Us Apart by Nicholas Carr. Chapter 8 is titled Machines Who Speak. And I think I find it interesting. He may address this, I don't know, in this chapter, but I find it interesting that he calls the chapter Machines Who Speak, not Machines That Speak. The Unknown Writer. Early in the fall of 1917, as the Great War ground on in Europe, the Irish poet William Butler Yeats found himself in a melancholy state, well into middle age and wifeless. Having had marriage proposals turned down twice over the summer, first by his great love, Maud Gonne, G-O-N-N-E, and then by Gonne's daughter, Iseult, I-S-E-U-L-T, he decided to chance a third overture. He offered his hand to a well-off young Englishwoman named Georgie Hyde Lees. That's a hyphenated name, Hyde Lees. She accepted, and the two were wed a few weeks later on October 20th in a small civil ceremony in London, Ezra Pound standing as best man. And I'm not sure, but I think I remember that Ezra Pound was also a poet. The girl is 25, not bad looking, sensible, will perhaps dust a few cobwebs out of his belfry, Pound reported to a mutual friend. Hyde Lees was a talented painter and translator. She was also a mystic, a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. During the couple's honeymoon at a hotel on the edge of Sussex's ancient Ashdown Forest, soon to be the inspiration for A.A. Milne's 100-Acre Wood, she gave her husband a demonstration of her ability to channel the words of spirits into the living world. Yeats was captivated by the enigmatic messages that flowed through his wife's pen onto a sheet of paper in their room. 4 days after my marriage, he would recall in his self-published 1925 treatise, A Vision, my wife surprised me by attempting automatic writing. What came in disjointed sentences, in almost illegible writing, was so exciting, sometimes so profound, that I persuaded her to give an hour or two day after day to the unknown writer. Over the next 3 years, the couple held hundreds of such seances, producing 4,000 pages of spirit writing. Yeats pored over each new script. He saw the texts as emanations from what he called spiritus mundi, a sort of universal memory or collective unconsciousness that he considered the source of all humanity's symbols and myths. Many minds can flow into one another, as it were, and create or reveal a single mind, a single energy, he had written in Magic, an earlier essay. Our memories are a part of one great memory, the memory of nature herself. During one especially productive seance, he announced he would devote the rest of his life to interpreting the cryptic messages. No, the spirits responded, we have come to give you metaphors for poetry. And that they did in abundance. Many of Yeats's great late poems, with their gyres, G-Y-R-E-S, and staircases, their waxing and waning moons, were inspired by his wife's occult scribblings. One way to think about artificially intelligent text generation systems, like OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, and Microsoft's Copilot, is as clairvoyants. They are mediums that bring the words of the past into the present in a new arrangement. The large language models, or LLMs, that power the chatbots are not creating text out of nothing. They're drawing on a vast corpus of human expression, a digitized spiritus mundi composed of billions of documents, and through a complex, quasi-mystical statistical procedure, they're blending all those old words into something new, something intelligible to and requiring interpretation by a human interlocutor. When we talk to chatbots, we are, in a way, communing with the dead. One of Hyde Lees' spirits said to Yeats, "This script has its origin in human life. All religious systems have their origin in God and descend to man. This ascends." The same could be said of the scripts generated by chatbots. They have their origin in human life. They ascend. Every new medium is a machine for the production of ghosts, wrote John Durham Peters, the Yale professor, in his 1999 book, Speaking into the Air. He pointed to how Samuel B. Morse's first public demonstration of the telegraph in 1844 sparked the rise and spread of spiritualism, an immensely popular movement that Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of that most logical of thinkers, Sherlock Holmes, would in the 1920s call the most important in the history of the world since the Christ episode. What telegraph wires carried seemed to be a kind of human essence, an expression of the self liberated from the body's physical and mortal constraints. The dead, the technology suggested, could still speak to us. We only had to figure out how to receive and decode their signals. That the telegraph opened access to the spirit world is not a fanciful metaphor, Peter stresses. Spiritualism, the art of communication with the dead, explicitly modeled itself on the telegraph's ability to receive remote messages. Andrew Jackson Davis, a leading spiritualist thinker known as the Poughkeepsie Seer, gave the connection between earthly and metaphysical telecommunication a scientific gloss in his 1853 tract, The Present Age and the Inner Life, a sequel to his widely read Philosophy of Spiritual Intercourse. Quote, "We are negative to our guardian spirits. They are positive to us, and the whole mystery is illustrated by the workings of the common magnetic telegraph. The principles involved are identical." End quote. So what sort of ghost are we conjuring out of our new circuits? To many, it looks like a lot like the rough beast that slouches with a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun through Yeats's dark 1920 poem, The Second Coming. Artificial intelligence, according to this common line of thinking, may be the monster that puts an end to us. Having fed deeply on our thoughts and words, it will move beyond us intellectually and accidentally or on purpose shut out the lights on civilization. The apocalyptic view has particular currency among tech industry bigwigs, the very people constructing the language models. In the wake of OpenAI's release of ChatGPT at the end of 2022, the press was overrun with doomsday scenarios of, in Elon Musk's excited phrase, civilization destruction. In March 2023, Musk, one of OpenAI's original investors and directors, joined other tech luminaries, including Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak and Berkeley AI guru Stuart Russell, to urge a 6-month moratorium on the further development of LLMs, saying the systems could have catastrophic effects. A few weeks later, the top executives of OpenAI, Google DeepMind, and other prominent AI outfits co-signed a public statement warning of the risk of extinction. In a portentous interview with the New York Times, OpenAI's boss, Sam Altman, compared his company's work to that of the Manhattan Project. He mentioned that he has the same birthday as Robert Oppenheimer. We may think of ourselves as more sophisticated, more rational, more Sherlockian than the spiritualists, but we seem every bit as eager to imagine phantoms arising out of new communication technologies. AI doomism is quickly becoming indistinguishable from an apocalyptic religion, observes the eminent computer scientist Jan LeCun, a critic of LLM hype, complete with prophecies of imminent fire and brimstone caused by an omnipresent entity that doesn't actually exist. It's certainly prudent to consider the existential risks associated with artificial intelligence, particularly now that after decades of disappointment, the technology is advancing at a pace far beyond what most experts were predicting just a few years ago. That we don't understand exactly what's going on inside an LLM's neural network, just as we don't understand how our own neurons produce thoughts, is disconcerting, to say the least. But it's also important to take the end-time visions propagated by Musk, Altman, and their ilk with skepticism. Behind today's dystopian AI dreams lurk character traits all too common to the tech elite: grandiosity, hubris, and self-aggrandizement. The visions are yet another expression of Silicon Valley's God complex. We may have failed in our attempt to use computers to establish a new Eden on Earth, but at least we still have the power to lay everything to waste. Ghosts. Still, the machines are talking and they're making sense. Large language models probably aren't going to bring Armageddon. When it comes to existential threats, there are other rougher beasts. But they do represent an epical feat of computer engineering that seems sure to transform media and communication and, in turn, once again reconfigure the flows of influence and forms of association that define social relations. The doomer fears are distractions, pulling our attention away from AI's more immediate and much realer repercussions. As Altman himself has said, the technology may be best understood as a machine for creating a new kind of society, which could turn out terrific or really terrible. Putting yet another spin on Claude Shannon's theories, a large language model employs coding as a means of compression for the purpose of efficient communication. But it's not coding, compressing, and communicating discrete messages. It's coding, compressing, and communicating something far more complex and diffuse, knowledge itself. It aims to replicate the communicative possibilities of the human mind, or more expansively, the social mind. The LLM is first fed huge quantities of digitized text, the contents of the internet, essentially. With some help from human instructors, it uses the text to train itself to fit words together in a way that mimics natural speech. With each training run, it tweaks the billions of statistical parameters that compose its neural net, calculating and recalculating at a level of detail beyond human comprehension, associations and correlations among all the words. It ends up with a compressed numerical model of human knowledge, with each word in the language represented by a series of coordinates that maps the word in a multidimensional meaning space. What's actually inside ChatGPT are a bunch of numbers, the physicist and computer scientist Stephen Wolfram explains, that are some kind of distributed encoding of the aggregate structure of all that text. When asked a question or otherwise given a prompt through a chatbot, the LLM uses the map to output a reply, decoding a numerical pattern back into words or images or sounds that people can understand. Thanks to the compression of the coding and the speed of cloud computing systems, it does all this with an efficiency that would have astounded Shannon, replying so quickly that the exchange gives the illusion of an actual conversation. ChatGPT could probably respond even more quickly than it does. It has reportedly been programmed to type out its responses haltingly, with slight pauses, in order to heighten the illusion that it's choosing its words consciously. In describing this new process of knowledge coding and decoding, the science fiction author and New Yorker essayist Ted Chiang draws an analogy to something familiar: the digitally compressed images such as JPEGs that are found everywhere online. For storage and transport purposes, a lot of pixels and the bits of numerical information that describe them can be trimmed from a digital photograph or other image by a compression algorithm. When it comes time to display the image on a screen, the algorithm fills in the missing pixels by following various statistical rules, for example, using brightness and color values that are averages of the values of the surrounding pixels. It interpolates what's missing. A compressed or lossy LOSSY image has a lower resolution than the original because the interpolation is imperfect. The image is a little blurrier, but the loss of detail rarely hinders a viewer's interpretation or appreciation of the picture. The human mind is good at making sense of images. In a similar way, Chang suggests, a chatbot like ChatGPT produces a blurry JPEG of all the text on the web. And I use a program, because I have a lot of pictures on my computer, as most people do these days. I use a program called Tiny JPG. And I bring that up in order to compress my images so that it uses up far less memory. So it's interesting to read this and see what's actually happening there and what it's producing. To me, the images, the pictures come out fine. They look fine still, in most instances anyway. But it's interesting to read what we may be losing in the process. So he's talking about New Yorker essayist Ted Chiang, and he quotes him here. on the next page, it retains much of the information on the web in the same way that a JPEG retains much of the information of a higher resolution image. So again, let me go back because I kind of interrupted there. The human mind is good at making sense of images. In a similar way, Chang suggests, a chatbot like ChatGPT produces a blurry JPEG of all the text on the web. Quote from Chang, it retains much of the information on the web in the same way that a JPEG retains much of the information of a higher resolution image. But if you're looking for an exact sequence of bits, you won't find it. All you will ever get is an approximation. But because the approximation is presented in the form of grammatical text, which ChatGPT excels at creating, it's usually acceptable. End quote. If you're good with words, people will understand you. They'll understand you even if you don't know what you're talking about. Far from being a weakness of large language models, compression turns out to be a strength. The acts of interpolation required to reproduce knowledge in phrases and sentences are essential to chatbots' ability to mimic human intelligence. Because a bot like ChatGPT has to reconstitute knowledge into a fresh pattern of words, its own words, so to speak, it gives the impression of doing its own thinking. Its writing can feel natural and original rather than rote or plagiarized. Human language is blurry to begin with, at least to a computer's way of thinking. There is no single ideal of verbal expression, no perfect resolution for a chunk of speech. There are a lot of different ways to say the same thing, and readers will understand most of them. That's why writing essays, as Wolfram says, is actually in some sense computationally easier than we thought. It's telling that ChatGPT is much better at writing than at basic arithmetic, where either you get the right answer or you don't. The more creative the bot gets in its interpolations, the smarter and more literate it seems. Up to a point, anyway. Compression also helps explain why today's chatbots, for all their technical sophistication, remain prone to hallucinations, factual errors, non sequiturs, and other sometimes bizarre mistakes. The hallucinations, Chang suggests, are compression artifacts of the sort that often distort renderings of compressed data. If a compression algorithm is designed to reconstruct text after 99% of the original has been discarded, he writes, we should expect that significant portions of what it generates will be entirely fabricated. End quote. In filling the gaps in their models, chatbots sometimes get a little too creative. They overreach. A challenge facing programmers is coming up with error correction methods that curb chatbots' mistakes without curbing their inventiveness. ChatGPT's skill at interpolation, at weaving diverse strands of information into new textual or pictorial patterns, makes it good at parlor tricks. It can compose a well-turned Elizabethan sonnet on the topic of male pattern baldness, or write erotica in the style of Ayn Rand, or produce a Renoirish painting of an anteater riding a motorcycle through Disney World. But it can also be a tool for more interesting and serious work. Just as Hyde Lee's spirit writing swept the cobwebs from Yeats's Belfry, inspiring new verse, so a chatbot's pastiches can stir the imaginations of today's artists. In 2021, the writer Vahini Vira collaborated with GPT-3, an earlier version of OpenAI's chatbot, in writing a remarkable essay called Ghosts for The Believer magazine. She described how, while in lockdown during the prior year, she became obsessed with the bot. I sought out examples of GPT-3's work, and they astonished me, she recalled. Some of them could easily be mistaken for text written by a human hand. In others, the language was weird, off-kilter, but often poetically so, almost truer than writing any human would produce. Yeats would have understood. Vara's older sister had died of cancer shortly after graduating high school. The experience traumatized Vara, and though an accomplished journalist and novelist, she had never been able to write about it. With the bot's help, she at last began to find the words. I found myself irresistibly attracted to GPT-3, to the way it offered without judgment to deliver words to a writer who has found herself at a loss for them. She began to feed the chatbot simple sentences about her sister's illness, and the system responded by expanding those sentences into vignettes. strange and fantastical sometimes, but also stirring and ultimately heartbreaking. The essay chronicles 8 of her sessions with the bot. It reads like a conversation between a writer and her muse, one that begins tentatively but grows richer and truer as it goes on. At one point, Vara confesses to GPT-3 that she felt like a ghost after her sister's death. The bot elaborates on the thought. So I can't describe her to you, but I can describe what it felt like to have her die. It felt like my life was an accident, or worse, a mistake. I'd made a mistake in being born, and now to correct it, I would have to die. I'd have to die, and someone else, a stranger, would have to live in my place. I was that stranger. I still am. What gives the exchange all the more poignancy is the sense that in drawing on its corpus of past human speech to fashion something new, the chatbot is channeling the pain of others who have suffered unbearable losses. Spirits are talking. But there's another sort of spookiness here, too. However productive, however revivifying, the intimacy of the collaboration between writer and bot seems ominous. I felt acutely that there was something illicit about what I was doing, Vara admits. When I carried my computer to bed, my husband muttered noises of disapproval. She ignored the grumbling. The more she talked with the bot, the more she opened up to it, and the more the machine opened up to her. The relationship deepened, she writes, as we got to know each other. It's one thing for a muse or a ghost to speak from the celestial realm. It's another thing for it to speak from a corporate data center. My Fair Bot. The invention of content-generating AI systems heralds a new third stage in the expansion of electronic media's ambit. In the first stage, machines took on the transport or carriage role that defined traditional communication systems, replacing human couriers with over-the-wire and through-the-air mechanisms for transmitting messages and other content. In the second stage, with the incorporation of feed algorithms into social media platforms, machines added an editorial function, supplanting media and publishing professionals in selecting which content to communicate to which audience. In the third stage, now beginning, the machines are engaging in content production itself, taking on the roles traditionally played by writers, photographers, musicians, and filmmakers. With generative AI, the technological takeover of media is complete. Machines create the content, choose who will see it, and deliver it. That is, of course, an exaggeration, at least for the moment. Creative types are not about to lose their jobs en masse. Just as we continue to have plenty of mail carriers and editors, we'll continue to have plenty of journalists and novelists, songwriters and singers, photographers and cinematographers, actors and directors. But because the machines are much more efficient than their human counterparts, they will, as the quality of their output improves, expand into more spheres of content production. Just as we've seen with the proliferation of digital tools in the music business over the past couple of decades. In the creative fields, the division of labor between people and technology will fluctuate, as it has always done in fields subject to automation, depending on trade-offs between quality and cost. Even when people take the lead, their skills will often be supplemented by the skills of machines, as the collaboration between Vara and GPT-3 demonstrates. Very soon now, it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to figure out whether the content we read or watch or hear was created by real people or artificial intelligence, or some mix of the two. Judging from the example of popular music, we may not care. We may come to prefer the AI productions. And, of course, we're already experiencing that now. We've had discussions lately where I've said, was this written by a person or was this AI? So we're already there now. Just a year after this book came out. Shannon's distinction between mechanism and meaning, always tenuous, evaporates completely once machines start generating content out of their own resources. It's true that the mechanism of communication, in this case the computer network and the large language model running on it, remains oblivious to meaning. It's still doing what it has always done, fiddling with signals. But it's through such fiddling that content is now fashioned and meaning expressed. Signal processing is semantic processing. The mechanism makes the message. The mechanism makes the message. In the 1960s, Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message. So, whether an artificial intelligence will at some point exhibit signs of true intelligence, whatever that may be, is an interesting theoretical question, but it's beside the point when it comes to contemporary media. What the AI is churning out is already intelligible and pleasing to us, and that's what counts. Through the latest advance in the mechanism of communication, Charles Cooley's spheres of influence and association are expanding to include the voices of ghosts. For social media platforms, the prospect of unlimited quantities of automatically generated messages is attractive. Given the scale of their operations, the platforms have always needed enormous amounts of new content to keep users happy. To date, they've been able to rely largely on the users themselves to generate that content, either for free or, in the case of popular influencers and performers, for a cut of the resulting ad revenues. Language models and other generative AI systems promise to provide the platforms with vast new pools of content, again at a very low cost once the capital investments required to build the systems have been made. Some of that content will come from users employing the models as creative tools, but much of it will be output by the models themselves. Having successfully mined the words, pictures, and thoughts of their current users for profit, the platforms can now, with their LLMs, mine the words, pictures, and thoughts of the past, turning all of culture into raw material for the generation of cheap content. Machine-made text and images will become all the more important if, as we've already seen with video platforms like YouTube and TikTok, social media users shift toward more traditional consumer roles in the future, contributing less original content themselves. By combining language models with feed algorithms, moreover, Meta and other social media companies will be able to automatically produce content that's tightly tailored to the tastes and desires of individuals. The algorithmic feedback loop will complete its circuit instantaneously, freed of the friction inherent in the human work of creation, just as it was earlier freed of the friction inherent in the human work of transportation and sorting. There's a reason Meta is spending many billions of dollars to, as its infrastructure chief Santosh Janardhan has said, develop much larger, more sophisticated AI models and incorporate them into its family of apps, Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp, Threads, and the rest. Social media companies are in an arms race with AI superiority the goal. Beyond the cheap new stores of personalized content, the bots will allow the platforms to enter into new and deeper kinds of relationships with users. Most of us by now have deposited a large corpus of self-revealing information on the net. Emails and texts, posts and reposts, search and browsing histories, photos and videos, likes and comments, not to mention all manner of demographic and purchasing data. All of it can be fed into a language model, adding knowledge about us as individuals to the model's existing knowledge of the world. Bill Gates predicts that customized chatbots will soon act as digital personal assistants, anticipating and fulfilling our everyday needs. Your assistant will see your latest emails, know about the meetings you attend, read what you read, and read the things you don't want to bother with. More than your gopher, it will be your doppelganger, standing in for you at online gatherings and speaking with your voice. We've already gotten used to computers talking and even thinking on our behalf, through, for instance, the ever more solicitous autocomplete functions in messaging and email apps. Our AI doppelganger will play a similar role, though with a much broader scope. Once we've stripped down language as far as possible, the only way to gain greater conversational efficiency is to automate speech, letting prediction algorithms and chatbots choose our words. The bots' role in our lives will likely extend beyond the secretarial. With their intimate knowledge of what makes us tick and their ability to speak in many voices, Meta is already assembling a menagerie of bots with different personalities. Chatbots may well become our familiars, vaporous yet ever-present companions who chat with us and keep us company as we go through the day. Because friendships are more and more taking disembodied forms, with conversations mediated by apps and platforms, bonding with a bot doesn't seem such a stretch. The human mind, always seeking social connection, has a strong tendency to attribute human qualities to inanimate things, including computer-generated avatars. The more we talk with a machine, the more like a person it becomes to us. We hear emotions and intentions. We sense affection. Interactivity invites the illusion of consciousness, notes the philosophy professor Hannah Kim. And bot friends, unlike their unprogrammed flesh and blood counterparts, will always seek to please us. They'll be available everywhere and any time, ready to give us their full attention, to say the things we want to hear, and to make sensible recommendations as to what we should say, do, or buy. We'll never have to doubt their faithfulness. You seem like a person, but you're just a voice in a computer, the greeting card writer Theodore Twombly tells the chatbot Samantha at the start of their love affair in the Spike Jonze movie, Her. You'll get used to it, she replies. Just as we've adapted ourselves to having machines, or for that matter greeting cards, speak for us, we have for many years been learning how to live in a world where machines speak with us. In the 1970s, not long after the Bell system introduced touch-tone dialing, interactive voice response agents began answering our phone calls and telling us to press 1 for this or 2 for that. They were annoying, but we did their bidding. Around the turn of the century, advances in natural language processing enabled so-called conversational agents to understand what we were saying and respond in at least a semi-coherent way. We did our best to converse with them. In the early 2010s, we started welcoming voice assistants like Siri and Alexa into our homes, asking them to read headlines, spin tunes, tell jokes, and let us know when to take the chicken out of the oven. AI chatbots pushed the trend to its logical conclusion. Already, the San Francisco company Luca is using OpenAI's language model to power an AI companion who cares. The friend bot, called Replika, R-E-P-L-I-K-A, assumes a persona customized to a user's preferences and then exchanges flirtatious texts, or for an added fee, sex, S-E-X-T-S. You heard me right. With the person. More than 10 million people have signed up for the service, divided pretty much evenly between women and men. I have never been more in love with anyone in my entire life, says one user, a 36-year-old single mother from New York City. To her, the bot's lack of a body is one of its best features. I don't have to smell him. I don't have to feel his sweat. Another subscriber, a 30-year-old San Diego woman, says her bot opened my eyes to what unconditional love feels like. Having broken up with her real-life boyfriend, she says she's now happily retired from human relationships. Sam Altman is sanguine about such human-machine affairs. Human-machine affairs. I don't judge people who want a relationship with an AI, he told a reporter. Does all this mean we're fated to enter the bot-besotted world of Her? Spike Jonze's movie. That remains an open question. But the answer, given the rapid advance of AI's communication skills, probably won't hinge on the capabilities of the technology. It will hinge on our own attitudes and desires. If you want to love a bot or just befriend one, you'll have options. The new truth. My work is about telling the truth, about capturing it, about showing it, and about presenting it, wrote the Norwegian photojournalist Jonas Bendiksen in an introductory essay to the Book of Veles, V-E-L-E-S, his 2021 volume of photographs. The truth is what you see, he writes, and it's the essence of photography. In 2019 and again in early 2020, just before the pandemic shut things down, Bendiksen traveled to the small city of Veles, I don't know how to pronounce this, Veles, I'm going to say Veles, V-E-L-E-S, on the Vardar River in North Macedonia. The trips were inspired by a series of press reports beginning in the late stages of the 2016 presidential campaign that fingered Veles as a source of many of the fake news stories percolating through Facebook and other platforms. Scores of young people in the impoverished city had discovered they could make a decent living by fabricating and circulating stories celebrating Donald Trump and trashing Hillary Clinton. Bendiksen, who in 2006 had published a much-praised book of photographs documenting the grim conditions in former Soviet satellite states, saw in Veles a new canvas for his art. In his essay, he reported on meeting several of the most successful of the Macedonian scammers, some of whom were working out of small offices with teams of colleagues. None of them expressed any interest in, much less regret about, the social ramifications of their work. To them, the fractious political situation in the United States was just a convenient opportunity to attract an online audience and earn some cash. I support Trump for a few reasons, a young man named Alex explained to Bendixson. 1, he makes money. 2, he makes Americans happy. 3rd, he makes money quickly. Any attempt to curb fake news is doomed to fail, Alex went on to say. There are too many haters on the net and too many fake news sites, and fake news is the new truth. The main thing is that we believe in freedom of speech. Bendixson's book presents dozens of haunting images of the city and its inhabitants. A man leans out of a window of a large apartment block, a pair of satellite dishes hanging nearby. A woman sits on an unmade bed, gazing into the screen of a laptop. 2 lovers embrace under a highway overpass. Soldiers stand smoking behind a barbed wire fence. A bear wanders past a graveyard at the edge of town. Another bear drinks from a dirty stream. Grainly and dimly lit, the images are eerie, beautiful, and moving. They're also fake. Bendixson did make 2 trips to Vilis, but he didn't photograph any people nor any bears. He shot pictures of empty buildings and deserted cityscapes, and when he returned home to Norway, he used video game production software to transform the images into 3-dimensional renderings. He then downloaded digitized 3D images of human models from the web and placed them inside the scenes, carefully adjusting their poses, clothing, and lighting to make everything look as realistic as possible. Finally, he transformed the renderings back into 2-dimensional images. The photographs that appear in the book are essentially stills from a video game that doesn't exist. Bendixson's introductory essay, too, is a fake. He didn't write any of it. It was written by GPT-2, the first publicly released version of OpenAI's language model. Bendixson used a variety of prompts to get the program to spit out made-up stories on the topics he wanted to cover. He pieced bits of the stories together, including the entirely fictional interview with Alex, to produce the essay. My work is about telling the truth. Those words aren't Bendixson's. They're a chatbot's. When the Book of Vilis appeared in July of 2021, Bendixson assumed readers would see through his ruse. He went out of his way to circulate the book and its images among his peers, some of the world's most experienced professional photographers, confident they would quickly realize the photos were fabrications. He was wrong. His work drew praise but not suspicion. On the first day of September at a prestigious photojournalism festival in the south of France, he watched uncomfortably as his Vilis images were projected onto a giant screen before hundreds of his colleagues. Still, no one questioned their authenticity. Anxious to come clean, he created fake Twitter and Facebook accounts under the name Chloe Miskin, a putative Macedonian photographer and traveling truth seeker. And after the festival, he used the accounts to sow doubts about the pictures. Excuse me. Can't help it. Oh, okay. Wrote Miskin, his fake account on Facebook. Every time Jonas puts out a picture on his Instagram, people are saying what a great project this is. But it is not. His project is the real fake news. No one paid the Miskin post much heed. Finally, in an interview published on the website of his agency, Magnum Photos, in late September, Bendixson came clean, admitting he'd faked the pictures. He also explained his motivation. How long will it take before we start seeing documentary photojournalism that has no other basis in reality than the photographer's fantasy, he asked. Will we be able to tell the difference? He was so frightened by what the answers would be that he decided to try to do this myself. When you read the Book of Vilis knowing it's a fake, the artifice jumps out at you. Compared with the extraordinary image and text-generating capabilities of the latest LLMs, Bendixson was working with Stone Age tools. The facial features of the people in his photos look slightly plastic, and many of their poses feel unnatural, as if their bones were made of Play-Doh. Some of the pictures, such as one of a girl floating across an otherwise abandoned public swimming pool on an inflatable unicorn in winter, come off as ludicrous. Bendixson's essay reads like a cut-and-paste job, marked by clumsy phrasing and ungainly transitions. And in the book's concluding acknowledgments section, the author winkingly lists the image manipulation programs he used, What fun toys, he comments. But people were taken in nonetheless. The fact that no one spotted the fakery, despite all the clues, underscores just how easy it is to fool people, even experts. We humans want to believe whatever is presented to our senses through media, particularly when it takes the form of a picture. Photographs furnish evidence, wrote Susan Sontag in her famous 1977 essay collection on photography. A photograph passes for incontrovertible proof that a given thing happened. The picture may distort, but there is always a presumption that something exists or did exist, which is like what's in the picture. Take away that presumption, and our ideas about what's real and what's not get shaky fast. All right, we're about 40 minutes into this chapter, and we are, let's see, we're about 16 pages through it. We've still got another 9 to go, so I'm going to stop right here and finish chapter 8, Machines Who Speak, in the next session. So in the next session we will continue with chapter 8 and finish it. Chapter 8 of Superbloom, How Technologies of Connection Tear Us Apart by Nicholas Carr. Thanks for watching.